are you from? It's only recently that I've actually begun to realize fully where I'm from. You see, when you ask that question, where are you from, there's a lot of ways you can answer it. And one of them is, where's your ethnic heritage? And for me and my family, we came from Scotland and Ireland. We were farmers. In 1772, we moved to Virginia because of a famine and the poor crops and government oppression of England, of the Irish and the Scottish. Then we moved to Kentucky. This is my ethnic heritage, where I'm from. Now that's my ethnic heritage, but you could also answer my question, where I'm from, by looking at my geographic heritage. You see, I grew up, was born in Indiana. I'm a native Hoosier. Do you know where the word Hoosier comes from? It was back in the day when Indiana was on the edge of the frontier. It was a really rough place, and people come along and they would see a bar fight had gotten really bad, and there was an ear laying on the floor. Somebody's ear had been cut off, and they'd look at that and they'd say, "Whose ear?" Okay, from Indiana, I moved all over the place. I moved to Chicago, and then back to Indiana, and then to California, and back to Indiana, and then, let's see, where was next from there? Chicago again, and then up into Michigan, and then down to North Carolina, and then back up into Michigan. Geographically, I'm basically a mutt. So then I can answer the question where I'm from in a spiritual sense. There's a spiritual heritage that I have. You see, I grew up originally in the denomination called the Nazarenes, and then in elementary school, my mom moved us to an Assemblies of God church, and then I went to Wheaton College, where I met my wife, who grew up in the Presbyterian church. These are all, like, the Presbyterians are basically the smart Christians. And then from there, we ended up in a United Methodist church, where we are at now. That's my spiritual heritage. Now, this is something more that I have learned about my spiritual heritage lately, as we as a church have begun to attract more and more people who haven't given up on God, but they have given up or are about ready to give up on the church. They've done so for two reasons in large part: because of the white church's silence on racism and the church's exclusion of LGBTQ people. And in many cases, that also includes a lack of gender equality in churches. And recently, I was watching Shiny Happy People. No, not the REM Shiny Happy People. The documentary Shiny Happy People about the Duggars. But it's really not about the Duggars. It's about this bigger sort of fundamentalist movement in the United States. And as I was watching that, I realized I grew up in that. That's what I grew up in. Now, fundamentalism was a modernity reaction in Christianity to science and the theory of evolution. And it was Christians who separated themselves from culture and society to create little bubbles that they ended up growing up in. Now, what I've only recently begun to realize is that that bubble worked pretty well for me, because it was really created for white heterosexual men. And because I'm all of those things, I found it to be a very caring and grace-filled space. But that's not the case for everybody. In my later teens, fundamentalism began to not work for me intellectually or theologically. And I ended up marrying into United Methodism, which gave me a lot of resources for sort of deconstructing and reconstructing my faith in a supportive and encouraging environment. Because I never had to choose to leave my church or was never kicked out, I don't have some of the wounds and the pain that many people do. So what's the point of me telling you all of this about my heritage, my ethnic, geographic, and spiritual heritage? Well, here's the problem that I want to wrestle with today. In the wake of the pandemic and polarization, we've missed some questions that perhaps we were meaning to ask that would rebuild connection and community. We don't really know where we're all coming from. Political polarization over the last 8 years has decreased our curiosity and our consideration for having conversations with people who think differently than we do, or might even be considered to be on the opposite team. We don't take time to get to know people who are different than us. And sometimes we don't even take time to get to know people who are right around us. Now, 2024, things are only going to get worse. I saw this bumper sticker on a car recently, giant meteor in 2024. Please make it all stop. I mean, it feels like it's going to be a dumpster fire, right? We struggle to have courageous conversations, and we really struggle to go deeper with the people who are around us. In the wake of the pandemic, things got magnified that were already there. Our tech-saturated, individualized society pushed us further and further away from connecting in ways that would build deep community. I've got a question for you. I want you to talk with somebody next to you, or put your answer in the chat. Here's the question. What's your ethnic, geographic, or spiritual heritage? Pick one and let's talk about it.